Hi, I'm Jean Schumacher, founder of the Plant-Based Academy, where I provide help and support and guidance and resources to switch to a plant-based lifestyle and get your health back. Today, I have the privilege of connecting with a very dear friend and a lovely lady, Dr. Debra Shapiro, who is a plant-based board-certified gynecologist. She's also a graduate of a Main Street Vegan Academy, certified as a vegan lifestyle coach and educator. She completed the plant-based nutrition certificate through eCornell and the Health Coach Institute. And you can find her at her website, A New View of Food. So, Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here tonight.
Well, I really missed you, and we had so much fun working together. And I love connecting with people from all over. And you have that platform to be able to do that. I am also board in lifestyle medicine. I don't know if you said it, but it's just something. So I'm here to answer any and all of your questions. And if I can't, I will try to refer you to some specialists who can.
All right. Well, let's dive right in because we already have some questions that people had sent in ahead of time. First up, is there anything that you wish that more of your plant-based patients were aware of and followed for optimum health?
Stuff your face with greens, with greens, because those are the healthiest food to eat, and berries, and try to eat organic and make sure your water is clean. But mainly, I think not to skimp on the greens, on the vegetables. I didn't like vegetables growing up, but now, I mean, really, I try to eat as much as possible because I think we're just learning more and more about the importance of what's in greens and berries too. So the healthiest foods, I would try to load up on the healthiest foods and try to minimize the things like the oils and the white bread and things like that that kind of sneak in.
They do sometimes, especially if you're eating out, because you really can't control what is
Yeah,
put down in front of you and what the ingredients are. I mean,
yeah,
obviously there's tricks, call ahead, whatever, but you're at that when you're eating out, it's a different
right.
animal. So
So if you're home, then really just try to have, I mean, you should see my salads are made in the biggest bowl, right? Yeah, right. Bigger than my head. And I enjoy it. And I enjoy it. It's taken a while to be able to stuff it all into my belly, but I can, and I feel great afterwards. And I have less joint pain, and my mood is better. And just all the benefits. So we'll see. We'll see. I just got a new kitten, and she's going to live another 20 something years. So I'm 65 now, and I hope that I can live to be 87. I really hope, because I need to be there for that. So I think all of us have to discover in our own lives the why. Why do you want to be as healthy as possible, and why do you want to live as long as you can, as healthy as possible? Because I'll tell you, the only thing that really matters in life is your health. And once that's gone, it's misery. I have some family members suffering, and it's not good to not be well. So everything that you can do to keep yourself healthy, you should try to discover your why and do it.
absolutely, because it's a journey. It's this one step at a time. And first of all, getting to the root cause, as we always know, and we always say, you have to get to that root cause. It's a big deal. So. Do you have any suggestions that would might help or prevent crepe skin?
So the most important thing to do is to use a sunscreen from a very early age. But of course, we're already 65, and we probably didn't. I didn't. I never heard about sunscreen. Even my father was a dermatologist. I always got burned every summer. And so the biggest way to preserve your skin is to wear sunscreen and to put it on every couple of hours. Who did that? Are you really supposed to? And also to wear a hat. The biggest sun damage is caused by ultraviolet rays from the sun. Never go into those tanning booths, ever, ever, ever. I can't believe they were ever invented. Protect your skin. It's sunscreen. It's all about sunscreen. And then if you didn't, and now here you are, then you're stuck, trying to make it a little bit better. And there are vegan collagens that do work. And I don't use collagen. I wouldn't use collagen, but I use vegan collagen. And there are oils, and there are moisturizers, and there's some so Gregor has a book now called, his latest book called How Not to Age, and there's a whole section on skin. And so there are things that you can use and take. They might have some risks, but there could also be some benefits too. And you can visit your dermatologist and see what they recommend. But the most important thing is to prevent crepey skin and to prevent aging skin is sunscreen and protect yourself from the sun.
So, and I just want to throw in Pure Haven products. Pure Haven has sunscreen and some amazing products to help, nourish the skin and hydrate it as well. So, and these products, I've been using these for, I don't know what, about 17 years now. These are incredible. They meet my standards in terms of being toxic free because a lot of the sunscreens are very, very toxic.
Very. I was just going to
Yeah,
say, when you look for a sunscreen, you want to use the titanium dioxide or the zinc oxide, but you don't want all that other stuff I used to buy with the banana boat stuff, all these weird chemicals,
right,
you don't want that at all.
right.
So, and I absolutely, your products, all the Pure Haven products are all toxin free, are very good. There's in momavation.com is good
Right.
for looking for products. She always puts Pure Haven on those lists.
Yep. And Yuka is a great app as well. What helps soft bones in the hand and wrist? They had surgery, but the doctor wasn't able to attach it correctly.
Ooh.
What are your thoughts?
So if we want to talk about about bone loss in general, because we reach our peak bone mass as women at around 30, the journey to be a healthy human really starts before you're even delivered. It begins with your mother's health before she conceived you, and then it is very important while she had you in her womb, and how that milieu, and then how you start out in life. And I grew up on meat and dairy at every meal, and lots of antibiotics because I was always sick. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm never going to have the microbiome that could have possibly had if I had been raised differently. So sometimes, and I didn't come to being plant-based until I was I was vegetarian at some point, but really eating only plants until I was about 52. So came to it a little bit late. But if you could start early, then you can protect your bones. And it's not about, just tons and tons of dairy, but it is getting enough calcium, and it's getting enough vitamin D, and getting enough exercise. So when my father came in and saw me watching TV after school, just lying on the couch watching TV, and he came in and he said, if you don't use your legs, they're gonna fall off. He was really right. And I have to hand it to him, because he was someone who always walked and always did those naval exercises and stuff that were popular in the 60s and 70s. So I think weight bearing exercise is very important, getting enough calcium and adequate vitamin D, sunlight, weight bearing exercise, strengthening and aerobic exercise. So all of it goes together, not smoking, because smoking is terrible for osteoporosis and terrible for your bones. There were studies that showed that when people had they had about 3 milk products a day, and this was a Swedish study, they actually had more osteoporotic fractures than when they had less than one. So dairy is not the answer. Animal protein is definitely not the answer, but it's a lot of plant protein, and making sure you get adequate levels of everything, all the nutrients. Dr. Clapper likes walking with a weighted vest, but you could also strap up to put it on a backpack and put some books in it. I remember doing that, and just going for a hike, little wrist weights, ankle weights, just you have to, but it's sort of use it or lose it. So if you're hospitalized and you're in the bed for a long time, especially if you're elderly, you're going to lose a lot of bone. But we reach our peak bone mass at 30. There's a small decrease until you reach menopause, and then it really accelerates for the first 5 years of menopause. You lose about 2% per year, and by the time we're really elderly, we've lost about 30% of their bones on average. Pretty bad.
When you are consuming things that are acidic, and some people don't know or understand, this goes back to a little bit of chemistry, that if you're consuming things that are acidic, and I say acid, like if you're consuming sodas, and okay, oh, I don't drink sodas, okay, seltzer waters, anything with bubbles in it are very, very acidic. So those things you have to literally pull other nutrients out of your system to alkalize that whatever you're consuming that's very acidic. So you need to be careful and be aware of what is acids and what are bases. Eating a plant-based diet, you're going to get hopefully about 80% of your food being on the more alkaline side, as opposed to things that are being acidic. But one of the easiest things is to get out of your diet, and to help strengthen your bones is to get rid of things that are acidic, like sodas and
Uh-huh.
seltzers and things like that. Very, very, very
Oh,
acidic. What do you view as a good level of vitamin D?
Oh, okay. Oh, so controversial. My goodness. So you can measure the vitamin D, the 25 hydroxy, 25 OH vitamin D in your blood. I've been taught, and I feel like Gregor's standing by this, that it's 30 nanograms per deciliter. is like the sweet spot. 30, 50, I wouldn't go above 80. So somewhere between 30 and 80 is great. I've worked with people who are more naturopaths and they would like are pushing it above that. I don't think there's any benefit to doing that. In general, I think 20 to 30 nanograms per deciliter is considered vitamin D insufficient, and less than 20 is deficient. And that would be not good at all. Most of us need about 2,000 international units a day to maintain. So if you're low, let's say I have a patient and I check the 25 hydroxy vitamin D and it comes back at 18. So really deficient. So what I do is I put them on 50,000 international units of D3 a week, not a day, but a week, 50,000 high dose for a week, every week for 8 weeks. That usually pushes it up. And then they go on 2,000 a day. I take 5,000 every other day just because it's a little bit easier. And I was a little bit low. I've definitely had times where I've gotten it up and then I've forgotten to take my vitamin D. And if it's the summer and you're not really outside, then it drops down again, but you could get it back up. So Gregor has a lot on nutritionfacts.org about how much you need. And depending on, some of you live closer to the equator than I do. I mean, I saw someone's from Florida. So you might even need a little bit less to maintain it. You're probably outside more. So you could definitely get it checked and then just go from there. And if you are very, very deficient, then I would try to get it up and keep it up and recheck it. The other caveat is about sort of the volume of distribution. So if you're obese, you're going to need more. It's not going to take just 2,000 to maintain. So I have women who are, morbidly obese, BMI is quite high, and they have a lot of extra adipose tissue on them. And so they actually need 5,000 a day. And you might even need more. So that's something that can be checked. I would try to keep it around 30 to 50 nanograms per deciliter.
Iodine is something that is tough to get on this lifestyle because we're not eating a lot of, we're not eating seafoods, things like that. Is there a way that we can get enough iodine without using like the iodized salt, especially for people like me? I can't have salt at all, iodized or not. So what do you
Okay.
got?
Let's say we need 150 micrograms of iodine every day. And it also depends on your soil. And if you're by the ocean, you may be growing vegetables in soil that has more iodine. But generally, we think about sea vegetables, things like nori, and are very safe to have. So a sheet of nori, or if you go out and you're making sushi rolls or sashimi, vegan, obviously. We're only talking about vegan here. But rolls that have nori in them would be great. And they're nori snacks that you can buy, but they're often with oil and salt. You can make your own. Take a big sheet of nori and you can put it in your oven and make it a little bit crunchy and put some little spices on it so that it's tasty. Like wakame and arame, those are perfectly fine. And when you go to a Japanese restaurant and you get a seaweed salad, if you ask for it, make sure that it's vegan, it doesn't have any fish sauce on it. That would probably be just fine. And the one to watch out for that we don't want to have is hijiki. Hijiki. Sometimes it's with a Z, sometimes it's with a J, but hijiki has too much arsenic. And boy, I have been finding people, not vegans, but I've been finding people with very high arsenic levels and mercury levels. I had someone who had too high arsenic because she was eating too much chicken and too much rice. And then I told her to stop it. And then she went and had fish. So then we checked it again. Her arsenic level was down, but now her mercury level was up. So this is really, the world has gotten a little crazy right now with the food being so contaminated. Of course, the chocolate is contaminated with lead and cadmium. But in general, I would stay away from hijiki, seaweed, because I rarely eat it because it's way too high in arsenic.
I would also add to that for me, because I can't have salt at all. So it's difficult. And I did have issues with my thyroid, which I was able to heal. So one of the things, my tricks is to take kombu is very, very high in iodine,
Yes.
very high. And it comes in these big sheets. And so what I do is I take scissors and I cut it up into about an inch by an inch square.
Yeah.
And I don't like that fishy flavor of seaweed. I never have liked it ever. Anyway, I don't know. It just skeeves me out, just that flavor. So I just throw it in my smoothie. I don't taste it. I'm getting enough iodine.
It does come in sort of these corally strips. But again, I take a piece, I put it in my Instant Pot when I'm cooking my beans.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it gets rid of the gassiness of beans because I soak them really well anyway. And I don't eat it. I just let it, the iodine seeps into the beans and then I'm getting my iodine that way. I've never had an issue with my thyroid, but that's what I've done. And we don't really use salt either in the house.
Is there a way to resolve an overactive bladder?
An overactive bladder. If you are postmenopausal and this is an issue, you could think about vaginal estrogen and see if it helped at all. I don't know whether it really will. There are these anticholinergic drugs that really help to relax the bladder. If you actually do have this overactive bladder that's sort of, like the bladder itself is just sort of, it's just making you feel like you always have to go. I have to say that there are things you could drink that make it worse. I think caffeine really does make it a little worse. At least it does for me, but I don't know whether other people feel this way. But I know that when I have a big cup of coffee, it's half soy milk and half coffee, but still I can feel like I have to go all morning, even when I don't really have to go. So I think it is a known bladder irritant, not quite the same as having an overactive bladder. But yeah, there are these drugs that you would use. But what I would do if I had an overactive bladder, if I was worried that I had something going on with my urination, it wasn't right, either incontinence or this feeling like you have to go all the time, and you can't really control it by controlling, when you drink and when if it really is a problem, then I would go to a gynecological urologist and be tested and be tested properly. They do these things called urodynamics, and you can actually have it diagnosed properly so that it isn't misdiagnosed, because it could be you have interstitial cystitis and it's not an overactive bladder. It really is something else, and then you treat it differently. So again, not knowing your situation, I just think a gynecological urologist is the one to see.
Is there a benefit to mammograms, or is thermography a better option?
Right. Okay. I have been hearing this word thermography over the years, ever since I went to Santa Cruz University of California, Santa Cruz. It is not mainstream. It is not something that we have ever, ever, ever heard of, recommended. I'm sorry, maybe the naturopaths, maybe people who provide a different kind of level of care, maybe they've investigated it, use it. I don't know. OBGYNs are not recommended. Radiologists don't recommend. We have recommendations about breast cancer screening from a number of different big organizations. We have American College of OBGYN, we have the American Cancer Society, we have the United States Preventive Services Task Force, we have American College of Radiology, just to name a few. And we probably have the American College of Surgeons. They're always, and what they come down with is mammography is sort of the gold standard. When people are determined to be at higher risk for breast cancer, then they even recommend, and they have this, you might have seen on your own, if you're old enough to get a mammogram, then you might have seen that they actually determine your risk by using something called a Tyrer-Cuzick risk assessment tool. And if your lifetime risk of breast cancer is greater than 20%, then they're going to recommend some additional screening, like ultrasound, maybe at the same time that you have the mammogram, because that has been shown to help to determine have you ever looked when they're doing the ultrasound, you can see the breast tissue is very homogeneous. And then all of a sudden, if there's a cyst, there's like this big black hole in there, and it's like, that's a cyst. Or if you find something that's like calcifications, it'll be dark white. So that's really the gold standard. Now, when to start all this is totally up to you. I remember the first time I went to a conference, and they were not, these plant-based doctors were saying, do not do mammograms. Do not do mammograms. And I kind of fell off my chair, because I'm a board certified OBGYN, and we have been taught you get a mammogram starting at age 40, every 1 to 2 years until 50, and every year after that. Now in Switzerland, there's no recommendation for just screening mammography in low risk women. There's no recommendations.
Perimenopause.
Perimenopause.
What is it, and how do I know I've started?
Yeah. So we're born with a certain number of follicles in our ovaries, and they start to degrade kind of right away. And then by the time we reach menarche, the time when we get our first periods, we have a certain number left. And then every month, a bunch of eggs or a bunch of ovum are recruited, and usually just one, sometimes two, gets to be big enough. This is called a Graafian follicle, and that's the one that gets ovulated, and that's the one that you can conceive with. And all the rest kind of just wither away. Even that follicle becomes this gland, the corpus luteum, that makes progesterone for 12 to 14 days. And if you don't get pregnant, if you don't conceive, if there isn't, this implantation and the message back to the ovary, to the corpus luteum to keep making progesterone because they've got a pregnancy until the placenta can make the progesterone, then that also involutes and becomes this, it starts as a corpus luteum and then it becomes this corpus albicans and then it just goes back into just regresses. So that's a normal cycle. And when you've run out of the good eggs that can be ovulated, then you kind of enter this time of the perimenopause where you're not ovulating, and even maybe even a little before that, where the perimenopause, meaning the time around the menopause. The definition of the menopause, the definition, it's not based on a lab value. The definition of menopause is a year without a period. So actually, you don't even know you are, by the time you know you're menopausal, you're postmenopausal, because that whole year that you don't have a period, you can't call yourself really menopausal. You're still perimenopausal, because menopause is a year without a period. Does that make sense to everybody? The definition of menopause is a year without a period. So the time you've gone a whole year without a period, and you are menopausal, and every time after that, you're sort of postmenopausal. But all the time before that, you were perimenopausal. And how do you know that you really have gone from the age of being able to conceive to this time that it may be more difficult to conceive because you're not ovulating. You sort of run out of the good eggs and you're not ovulating regularly. It's usually heralded by irregular bleeding. You may skip some menses. They may come a little more frequently, or you may have this prolonged bleeding because it's an anovulatory cycle and you didn't get those 12 to 14 days of progesterone to stabilize the lining. And so it just gets really thick and then it dribbles off over a long period of time. That might be your one symptom. You may also start getting some symptoms of having lower estrogen and fluctuating hormones. So you may have hot flashes, night sweats, may just be one or two, but it could be something, like just something. And it usually happens in the late 40s because the average age of menopause is 52 in this country, but anywhere between 45 and 55 is normal. We consider in menopause before 40 to be a little bit premature, but you'll start having some perimenopausal symptoms usually in the mid to late 40s. Irregular bleeding, and we like to see you just skip 1, skip 2, skip 4, skip the whole year, right? We like to see that space out, but sometimes people start having more frequent periods, more prolonged periods, more irregular periods, and that also has to be checked out. So the definition of dysfunctional uterine bleeding is bleeding that occurs more frequently than every 21 days, from the first day of one to the first day of the next. That's what we count it. You don't count from the last day of the period. You count from the first day of the period, cycle day 1, to the next cycle day 1. You want it to be greater than 21 days or more. So anything that's less than 21 days, you want to watch out for. Any bleeding that lasts longer, or 8 days or longer. So a week of bleeding is fine, but 8 days or longer, you want to watch out for. Or that's very, very heavy, where you're changing a pad every hour, that kind of thing. So if that goes, if it happens once, that's okay. You don't have to freak out if it happens once. But if it happens a couple of times in a row, like 3 times in a row, then absolutely see your doctor, because that's a time that you may actually need to have an ultrasound or an endometrial biopsy or both, because that's not normal. We'd rather you have less bleeding than more. We don't worry about less bleeding. If you bleed, I only have a period for 1 to 2 days, that's not a problem. That is not a problem. But if you bleed for 10 days and you're doing that every month, that's not okay. But it needs to be checked out.
How do you manage your health during these perimenopausal flare-ups, with bloating, gas, irritability, abdominal pain? Are there creams that we can use, or food or supplements that can help?
Supplements, the only supplements that I would really recommend would be if you're going to be plant-based, would be the B12 and the D, and maybe some DHA. And I just did a blood test to check, because I was listening to the Exam Room podcast, and Dr. Neil Barnard was on, and he was talking about omega-3 supplements and how to know whether you actually need them or don't need them. Some people never take them, and some people feel like find out that they're really low in omega-3s, and it's the whole ratio between omega-6s and omega-3s. And so I decided to mail away this little blood spot test for my omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. We'll see. But I do sometimes take an algae-based DHA. Okay, because that's what Gregor recommends for your brain, 250 milligrams of an sterilely grown algae-based DHA. So those are the three things, the D, the algae-based DHA, and the B12. You can't use supplements to reach optimal health that I know of. For the perimenopause, when people are still having periods, I guess I would take each symptom on its own. If you're still having periods, but you're having hot flashes and night sweats, things that I can definitely trace to being because of the fluctuating hormones, then I would give people, if they could take it, a low dose birth control pill. That's what we do. A very low dose, and there's some very low dose pills, like low estrogen, but something just to eve out the hormones. But when you're talking about, and even emotional stuff, like people have terrible PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where they really feel lousy for a couple, even a week or two before their periods. And if they're just miserable, then I think birth control pills are great. It also lowers your risk of ovarian cancer and uterine cancer. There are risks with blood clots, very low. Certainly, it's safer than getting pregnant. And there are some contraindications if you have hypertension that's not well controlled, if you have liver disease. I mean, there are contraindications to being on birth control pills, but if that's an option, then I think that's the most reasonable one for people who are having trouble in the perimenopause with symptoms that you can see are a direct result of fluctuating hormones.
You know, when you take somebody who's sad, you've got very high like estrogen levels, dealing with dairy, they're eating a lot of that stuff that they've got high estrogen levels and we're trying to reduce them. And, if you can get away and make sure that you're not deviating and getting into any dairy products, especially dairy products, ooh, not a good choice on during this time, and just making sure that you're eating as clean as you can possibly. I know it's very difficult to be 100% perfect in this day and age, this lifestyle and eating out and whatever, but whatever
The
you can
dairy,
do.
yeah, the dairy is really interesting because whenever I've had people come to me and say that their periods are too heavy, or
Mhm.
that they have acne, but definitely if their periods are too heavy, just stop the dairy. But I thought we were talking to people who are only plant-based, so I wasn't even going there. But of course, there is no reason, there's no animal on earth, no mammal that drinks milk as an adult by choice at all. I mean,
Right.
you could give a plate of milk to your adult cat, but I mean, no animal is going to seek that out and is going to be drinking milk as an adult. So we lose the ability to digest the lactose, the sugar in milk. Most of us do. It's almost a genetic mutation of Northern Europeans that have maintained the ability to digest lactose. But most of us in the world, Asians, Africans, Jews, Native Americans, I mean, you name it, except for those Northern Europeans, we all shouldn't be having. And the problem is that dairy is so addicting. And this goes back to the fact that it is addicting because the baby needs to be bonded to the mom. And so the milk contains these little chemicals called casomorphins. These are morphine-like chemicals. And this is why you love cheese. And I did too. I absolutely always got pizza with extra cheese. Didn't even think twice about it. There was no question. Pizza with extra cheese. Why not? Because cheese is so amazing. And everybody loves cheese. And that's why. Because these are morphine-like chemicals that are making you a little bit high. And I know because, I mean, cheesecake, my God. God, the way you would feel after eating cheesecake. And, from New York. So there's a lot of amazing things, but cheesecake and pizza.
Yeah.
So it's addicting. And the only way to not to get off of it is not to have it.
Right.
And there's so much cruelty involved with the dairy industry. If you wouldn't eat veal, you shouldn't have milk. End of story.
Well, on the way from perimenopause to menopause with a whole food plant-based diet, are there some plants we should be increasing or decreasing to be our
Yeah.
healthiest through this process and then beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. There've been some wonderful studies. I did give a talk at a couple of different places. One was in Texas and one was at the Peapod on menopause. And in doing this research, I found some really fantastic studies using flax as opposed to olive oil. And flax really works great. And also, of course, the PCRM studies on using soybeans have also been fantastic. So whole soy products, and there are other reasons to be having at least 2 soy products a day to reduce your risk of breast cancer, and it really will help with hot flashes. That doesn't mean a candy bar that had soy protein isolate because that really doesn't have any of the phytoestrogens in it. But those others, they sit in the beta receptor and they put the brake on breast cancer, but they also really help with hot flashes. But so I think there's room for healthy eating, and especially the omega, the having foods that are high in omega-3s, because estrogen is an antioxidant. So you're losing that. So if you have a diet that's full of antioxidants, that's full of anti-inflammatory foods, that's high in the omega-3s, and especially the flax that also have these phytoestrogens. Did you know lignans are a kind of phytoestrogen? And definitely soy. Maintaining a healthy weight is always going to help, because just being heavy is going to be insulating you more, and you're going to have more hot flashes. This is true. So high antioxidants, high anti-inflammatory. There have been studies coming out of Iran, a lot of studies actually from Iran, about anti-inflammatory indexes in foods and helping with hot flashes. Not just hot flashes, like just feeling better. Well, we all knew that, right?
I've heard along the way, some women, when you start getting a bunch of older women together, they start talking about menopause, and they're some are like, well, I never had any symptoms, I never had any problems. And then you get the other extreme of like, oh my God, I thought I was going to die. I thought I was set on fire like a torch. You know,
Yeah.
why? The majority of women seem to have some kind of issue as we move
Yeah,
through
the
menopause.
majority do.
Why
It's
is there
genetic.
such a discrepancy?
Partly it's genetic. I mean, we actually know that certain ethnic groups, like Native Americans, non-Hispanic Blacks, Hispanics, I'm going in sort of in order, Caucasians, and Asians sort of have the least complaints of, or least bothered by them. Native Americans the most, and so we're in there too. So I don't, who really knows? But it is genetic. We know now, we didn't before, about what causes a hot flash. It's a little bit mysterious still, but now we know a little bit more. There's a chemical in the brain called neurokinin. And if you infuse neurokinin, you can induce a hot flash. So what neurokinin does in the brain is it makes you more sensitive to small changes in temperature. So neurokinin B. So when you are in the perimenopause without estrogen, you become more sensitive to small changes, and you feel hotter. So small change in temperature, your body sees that you're hot, and so you try to dissipate the heat. You have this vasodilation at the skin, you get flushed, and then you sweat and you get cold, and then so it's a miserable thing. Why some people suffer more than others, I think that's just how we're all different. We're all a little bit different. Sometimes I think that if your mom went through it really easily, that maybe you can too. But also we know that diet and your body composition is going to make a difference also to how you feel. Because if you're heavy, you're definitely going to have more hot flashes and feel
Well,
and suffer more.
yeah, but I also want to throw in, the difference between somebody who's eating the SAD diet and somebody who's eating a plant-based diet. I think there's not as many issues with people that are plant-based, because I know quite a few people, there's a bunch of us ladies out there going through menopause that were plant-based at the time and had very little issues, going
Right.
through.
I'm with you, but it's interesting about there just aren't enough big studies
Mhm.
of vegan women, plant-based women going through menopause. I mean, there are a lot of ways that there could be more studies on plant-based women, and there just aren't, and I don't know why. But it's whether it's sexist, I don't know why.
Can menopause increase my other risk for other conditions?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's this relationship between estrogen and our, I guess, metabolism and our LDLs. Like without estrogen, your LDLs are going to go up a little bit. Now, again, I don't know whether they've studied whole food plant-based vegans through the menopause, and maybe you don't see your LDLs go up a little bit. I saw my LDLs go up a little bit as I got into menopause, so I have to work a little bit harder. But whether that's going to really translate, I don't know. But there is this loss of your antioxidant shield. You have to increase your antioxidant shield because you've lost the estrogen. And so definitely in terms of heart disease, also it's going to change your body composition. So there's more fat around the middle, which is terrible for heart disease, more visceral fat. It's just where instead of going from a pear shape when women are premenopausal to being more of an apple shape, which we know is worse for heart disease. And then, of course, I don't know if you mentioned about bone loss and osteoporotic fractures. I mean, all of that, it does affect our later life and our later years and the health of those years.
Hot flashes. Are there
Yeah.
any health benefits or reasons for hot flashes? I mean, like, okay, we've got fevers that kill bacteria, things like that, viruses. Yeah. What's going on with these hot flashes? What
No, it really is just this thermal dysregulation at the level of the hypothalamus. We just become more sensitive to smaller changes in temperature.
phytoestrogens is kind of one of those topics that, oh my God, it's phytoestrogen. So what are your thoughts on phytoestrogens during menopause?
Yeah.
And where should we get, you recommend that we get them?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so you do. There are two types of estrogen receptors in the body. There is a alpha receptor and a beta receptor. And the alpha receptor, if we just want to talk about the breast, the alpha receptor is where mammalian estrogen sits, our estrogen sits, cow's estrogen sits, right? So that estrogen, mammalian estrogen, will sit in the alpha receptor, and it promotes growth. So definitely not what you want, especially in a postmenopausal woman. And but there's another receptor in the breast for estrogen called the beta receptor. And that's where the phytoestrogens, the plant estrogens sit. They sit in the beta receptor and they put the brake on growth. So phytoestrogens are very important for reducing your risk of breast cancer. Not only do they reduce your risk of breast cancer, but they reduce your risk of a recurrence if you have breast cancer, even if you have a hormone receptor positive breast cancer. So I'm hoping that all of your oncologists are no longer saying you can't have soy, because that's just not true, because they sit in the beta receptor and they only help you. Also, soy phytoestrogens can act as an aromatase inhibitor. So they block the conversion of an androgen to an estrogen. So that again is a very good thing. It's kind of like aromatase, Arimidex, the aromatase inhibitor that you would take if you had breast cancer and you were after that long-term treatment that you would do. And so it can only benefit. So there are phytoestrogens in soy and a few different ones, and they can become in our body even more active in our gut in our gut microbiome if we have a really healthy gut microbiome. Flax seeds are also phytoestrogen. We need at least 2 whole soy foods a day.
One of the ways I get it is I make soy yogurt.
Yes.
Okay.
You
So, and I just use soy milk and I use a bacteria. It's ridiculously easy to make the soy yogurt in the Instant Pot. And I just do it. It takes literally less than 5 minutes to mix the probiotic with the soy milk. I raise it up to a temperature of about 105, and then I put it into jars, put it in the Instant Pot, and then I'd leave it overnight. Now, what's great about that is one, you're getting a lot of the soy milk. You're getting a lot of the phytoestrogens in that. But here's another great thing. In addition to the soy yogurt, what I do is I put it into it's a like a sieve or a strainer, and it strains out the liquids and it leaves the solids behind. So now you mix in some seasonings into that. You've got like a sour cream that is to die for. Oh my gosh, put that on potatoes, add it to a dish. You want to add a little creaminess to it. The longer you leave it in to separate the liquids, the thicker it is and the tastier it is. So the more concentrated that you're getting the soy.
Absolutely. And the other benefit is that when you buy it, I mean, there's so many reasons not to, but one, you don't really need it. But two, if you buy it, you're just getting that plastic. So we really have to reduce the use of plastic. And if you're just getting these small plastic, it's just ridiculous. And then two, I mean, I have had my share. I have used my share of plastics. I'm just saying, if you're trying to do better, then you can. And then two, all those other things in there, all those gelum gums and all those things. I mean, they may not be toxic, but we don't really need them. It's sort of just more processed stuff. Now, it's true that it might be fortified. They may put some extra calcium or vitamin D in there, or but usually they put sugar and jams and things that you don't need. So I agree with you. You can get your vitamins somewhere separately. You don't have to rely on that. And the best, soy milk is probably from Trader Joe's. It's just organic soybeans and water. But it is true. I know that we need calcium, and I do use sometimes these plant milks to get my calcium in addition to leafy greens.
David Danaev did a study on the Life smoothie and the amount of like the greens, and I've gone above and beyond what he has, and I have what's called a Tanita scale, and that Tanita measures my bone density. And even though I was plant-based, my bone density was going down. Once I started these smoothies, my bone density started going up and has stayed up. You're getting a lot of phytonutrients in this smoothie. It's an insane amount. You could never eat this amount of greens that I put in there.
The whole thing about smoothies is so interesting because I know so many people who just swear by them, and then other people say it's too much all at once. And I don't know, but I know I know in the David I remember talking to him and it was amazing. So I think if you like smoothies, you should absolutely go ahead. I know the other person who likes smoothies for the breast cancer is that Christy Funk. She
Yeah.
has a great anti-cancer, anti-breast cancer smoothie in her book Breasts and Owner's Manual, which is a great book also to put a plug in for.
Guys, I'm very grateful for you to be here. And of course, Deborah, thank you as always.
Yes, and I'm grateful for everything that you're doing, Jean. It's just remarkable, and I miss our our more regular chats. But
I
this is great.
know,
Thank you.
I
Thank
know.
you,
Thank you. Good night, ladies.
guys.
Have a nice evening.
Eat your greens. Bye.
Right.